Hey, what's up, guys? Today's episode is all about supporting and how to know when to use the different types of supporting that you're going to need. Whether that be light, medium, light, somewhere in between. These are always decisions that you have to make when you're working on a model. And this right here is the Night Stalker M3DM. It's a beautiful model here, really well sculpted. This is 25% larger than normal scale, but I'm still going to do this one solid. And this is going to be a pretty in-depth one. We're going to try and give you as much information as possible. It's 27 minutes, a little over that. So bear with us. If you're here for the long haul, I promise you're going to get a good lesson this time. All right. So as always, we're going to start with islands because that's the most logical thing to do. And as you do your island work, you're going to notice that your supporting is going to kind of fall along with that anyway. Manual supporting starts with islands. If you go the other way around, there's really no point to it. Just start with the islands. As you take a look at this one, most of the islands are going to fall on the parts that are dipping down. So we have it at a decent angle. I don't love the angle. The horns are kind of at a weird angle, but the fingertips are alright. They're pointing straight down. We're going to put a single tip support on each one, but I'm going to downsize them from the usual size that I use because I'm concerned, and as you'll see when I place one, that they are actually going to be a little too large for that appendage. And my concern is that you're going to lose a finger when you're removing the support. So I would prefer to make the tip a little smaller. But, a lot of people argue, they say, well, if it's too small, it's not going to work. In this case, all I'm changing is the tip diameter. Not going to change the diameter to the bar, and I'm not going to change the tip length itself. And the reason for this is because I just care about the bit that's actually touching the model. I don't care about anything else. The support itself can be the same amount of space because that's going to help it to survive. The smaller tip, however, is going to make sure that the finger survives too. Because, you can use a small web of little tiny stringy supports if you want, but in all actuality, it is better to use a couple of supports, one per finger, maybe a couple of extra supports on the side, some mini supports. But don't go crazy. This is, like I said, these are very wiry little digits. So something like this, for sure, don't want to do over supporting on this. That's definitely going to cause breakage when you go to remove the supports unless you're super careful, using like some snips or something. And honestly, who has time for that? Alright, as you can see, also another good place to place the support would be in the palm and along the sides of the hand, because then you can support the rest of the hand there. And you can draw up some mini supports from that later as well too if you want. I'm totally for the addition of mini supports where they're applicable. Just make sure that they don't collide with the model and make sure that they are in a place where they're not going to fuse. In some cases, fusion might happen, but you can always file that off with an X-Acto. It's not the end of the world sometimes on these little figures, especially when the details are really small. In this particular case, I think this hand is not going to be too huge, but in the same sense, you do want to be able to actually get something there that you can, finish up and clean. If you have a couple little bumps or something, I don't think that's going to be a big deal versus losing a finger. Because I think the end goal here is to make sure that all the parts print, not to make sure that they fall off into the vat. Now, I think the other trick with being able to determine what type of supporting tip, bar, diameter, etc. that you're going to need for your model has a lot to do with the size of the model. Now, in this particular case, while we're doing this supporting, I'm going to go over this with you guys, and I really want you guys to pay attention here. So, the way I gauge this is kind of easy. If a model is over a certain size, and we'll go ahead and use, let's say, between 32, because that's usually about the small, I mean, maybe 20, 25, 28 millimeters, all the way up to like, let's say 60 to 70. I'm going to use mostly lights, with possibly a few mediums, and a majority of those lights are going to be in the smaller range, like I'm showing you here with the hands, with the 0.15 diameter tips. And, you know, there are going to be some that will use the 0.22 tips. And you can kind of mix it up. You don't have to necessarily keep it strictly one or the other. It really depends on the part that you're supporting. If the part is small and fragile and sticks out from the model and might have some bits that look like it's going to snap off if you pull on it a little too hard, my suggestion would be to make the supporting as light as possible, meaning using smaller tips and mini supports wherever you can. So keep that in mind. That's definitely something you always want to note. So as far as using the different sizing scales, once the model gets over about, say, 60 to 70 millimeters at height, I'm usually going to start going towards like using kind of a mix of mediums, but that depends on how bulky the model is. See, like this model, for example, is actually 70 millimeters in height, but he's not very big. He's kind of thin, he doesn't have a lot of surface material, and the orientation I have him printing at is actually quite good. So I'm not really concerned with that, and I'm not really going to add a lot of medium supports. I probably won't add any because, to be honest, I don't think he's going to need them. Now, if he was a big, bulky mount or something like that with a large middle surface area, I would probably hollow it, but I'd also probably add some medium supporting in there as well, because I think the model could use it in that particular sense. In this sense, though, I think he'll do just fine with some light and super light supporting, which I think will work just fine with some bracings. And, you know, obviously as long as we get all of our islands as we move forward, I think we'll be in a good place. Alright, moving right along, we're going to continue supporting the rest of the areas here. Mostly island searching, obviously, stuff for right now. And then we're going to go layer by layer later. So this is the whole kit and caboodle. You guys are going to get the entire workflow here. Now that's the important thing to know. A lot of people have commented and said, well, what's the point of all that if I'm not doing the same model? It's not the fact that you're doing the same model, guys. It's the workflow that you're learning. It's not just the model. Now, if you want to, you can check out these models yourself on my mini factory. Check out M3DM. She's got a lot of great models. These are some of the ones that we sell as well. And if you have any custom requests, please let us know. Also, if there's anything you would like us to do a tutorial on or a demonstration on, ask away. That's what we're here for. Of course, you always have to be careful with things like horns, and I'm trying to be light here, using the small tip diameters, of course, on the horns as well, like I did with the hands. And this will, of course, make a much better difference when it comes to these printing out good, overall quality, and what they're going to look like once those supports are removed. That's one of the biggest issues that a lot of people do deal with, is they don't want damage to the model, especially when you're talking about a smaller one. Even a 70 millimeter model is still technically kind of small. You're still talking about something that's going to be harder to do the sanding and stuff on like that. So I just personally think it's better to have them as blemish free as possible. I personally don't like to do any sanding if I can avoid it, but we know that's not possible. Everything needs to be sanded. So much sanding. Now this little thing here I'm doing with the mini supports is just a little scaffold that I'm building right there, rather than putting a giant support attached to the chest or rib cage area there. There's a little bit of a shelf there that I don't like. I don't really want to leave alone. I think that needs to be supported, so I'm just going to build this little scaffolding here, and that's going to help that kind of stay up. As always, and I know I stress on this a lot, please make sure you apply some supporting to your yellow zones. That's going to be anything that has a 45-degree angle or greater, because that's going to give you, the best place to put your supports. And it's also going to be one of the places that really needs the supports. So it's kind of a double. Always important. I always mention it. I'll mention it again. I'm sure I'll mention it one more time again. But at least I'm trying. Now again, folks, the takeaway here is going to be the workflow. As you can see, what I'm doing is I try to put some supporting around all the areas that are going to have the most stress. I focus on the yellow zones. I take care of all the islands. I make sure that I place the supports around the other areas. And for the most part, I'm using the very small tip diameter with the 3.22 tip length and the 1.22 bar diameter on the actual supports. There's a number of reasons why I choose the super light supports for this kind of model. Again, it's a really small frame. He's not really thick. He doesn't have a lot of material in the middle. This isn't a big figure, even though it's 70 millimeters tall because I've upscaled it. He's still not a large usage of resin either. This is not a very big piece. So in general, I feel like there's definitely, this piece itself is going to be just fine with this type of supports. Of course, as we finish the actual support setup, we're going to have to go slice by slice and make sure we did some good work. That is the most important aspect of this, and a lot of people kind of skip it, or they'll use some program to help them along with it. Now, don't mind you, I actually use the island search feature to help me with this job. But in all cases, before I print something, I am going to go as close to being slice by slice as possible. I may not stop and stare at every single slice, but I'm definitely going to take a look at it. And for the time I've been doing this, if that's something I skip, then usually we have an issue, so I don't skip it. Always checking that.